I totally agree, man. I love it. Like in Clovis, we talk about non-scale victories because I have an episode too called How Weight Loss Ruined Everything, where it's just this myopic focus that like the way to be healthy is lose more weight just because everyone's overweight, you know. But what I love about this for guys in particular is this whole trauma thing. So I've gone like deep down this rabbit hole. I'm a big plant medicine guy. That's why like Kyle and I hit it off so quickly on the hunting trip and everything. We have a lot in common there. I grew up, you know, I was violent and kind of criminal activities and stuff when I was really young. And it all comes from trauma. And then when I started my music career, it was like alcohol all the time and like being promiscuous and all this rock star life. It's all from trauma. But the trouble is there are books out there like A Mind of Your Own by Dr. Kelly Brogan, which really details like depression and anxiety, but it is just 100% geared towards women. And what I love about this carnivore diet for mental health, it gives a door. There's a door that's now open for like very masculine men. And like, there's a great book called, I don't agree with his treatments because he's very medicine heavy, medication heavy, but there's a book called I Don't Want to Talk About It. And it's the concept of covert male depression, which is really an epidemic in America. And guys don't really have a way to voice this depression. Whereas like with women, it's so patronizing to them, but it's like almost expected. They're like, oh, they're always dealing with their emotions and their hormones and blah, blah, blah. Like, I hate that's sexist in my opinion anyway. But like, I just wish there were more resources for men dealing with these things. Cause I've gone deep down that rabbit hole with traditional therapy and every other thing I can because of trauma. So I think the carnivore diet's beautiful for that. It gives us almost like a manly outlet of like, what can I try? Like, wait, I'm going to go on a diet for my anxiety or my depression. Like, that's really hard for a lot of dudes to do. You know what I mean? So it's like this new opportunity.
Yeah. No, it's, you know, and I think there's, you know, so the carnivore diet is like part of what I do. You asked about the vision of the brand. And I think, I just formed a company called Opti Align. And so optimal alignment is kind of like my vision. And I think of our kind of Dream 100 clients being CEOs and people who deal with a lot of stress. And the carnivore diet is one piece of it. I think, you know, optimizing people's sleep, their exercise regimen, which I know we're going to probably talk a bit about, like, you know, how you do your macros and like what maybe the minimal effective doses to kind of optimize exercise and recovery. And then I've thought for a long time that there's just not a lot out there in the trauma space. Like, no one's really hitting the social media channels. The people that I've followed that have written the most about it, Bessel van der Kolk, I don't know if you've read his book, The Body Keeps the Score.
No.
Really good book. I think I have it right here, actually. Yeah. So this book, I don't know if the readers can kind of see it. He is he's like the, I think he's like the director at McLean or Massachusetts Mental Health Hospital, which is one of the best mental health hospitals in the world. And in the book, there's 3 sections, but he talks about what trauma is. In the first section, he goes into like the physical impact trauma has on the body, how the body actually kind of imprints into your psyche and into your biology, like trauma, and how it's you think of trauma as like this traumatic event, but then it's like, what does that mean? And it's like, well, actually there's trapped energy in your nervous system, in your deeper kind of consciousness. And you have to sort of, there's all kinds of modalities that we're just learning now about what to do with it and how to treat it. And I think, like you mentioned, in your childhood, if you had some sort of violent upbringing or you just experienced that, and again, you don't know how to process it because we're these human beings, or these creatures that are incredibly unique in that we've evolved these massive cognitive brains on top of these mammalian limbic systems, on top of the reptilian, archaic, you know, ancient amygdalas and instinctual systems. And the instinctual systems don't always talk the best with our cognitive brains. And so we experience these traumatic imprints in the deeper parts of our body, and that system has evolved over millions of years to kind of keep us safe and healthy. And then we're acting out through these sensations and these feelings, because ultimately how you feel is going to communicate, is going to be how you can operate the most out of. And so trauma is a crazy, crazy interesting thing. The Body Keeps the Score is a great book.
I'm going to check that out. I love that, because there's a concept that I talk a lot about called transgenerational epigenetics. So this is proven in animal studies like over and over and over. But so I mean, I think it's 100% likely that it happens in humans. It's just kind of hard to study in human studies. But what they talk about is trauma being passed down. So this idea of we have our genetic code, our DNA, and then we have our epigenetics, and these epigenetic imprints can be passed down like from mom to child. So you might have, you know, literally your great grandparents went through the Great Depression, and now here you are in 2020 at 30 years old, and you can't shake this scarcity mindset. Or like you might have some real weird hangups about money or all these issues, or like I'm going to lose all my money, and you can't adopt. We know that like the abundance mindset is really, really important, particularly for entrepreneurs, and you can't shake those things where it's literally imprinted in you. So I'm pumped about that book. I'm going to pick that one up. That sounds really good.
I mean, the other book I would say too, Justin, that you definitely, let me find it here. I have it. Oh, I just loaned it out actually. Oh, cool. I loaned it out to this gal because it blows my mind how many people are dealing with anxiety and don't have someone to talk to. Because it's such a kind of a prisoning condition. You're so crippled by it, and then on top of that, you're scared to ask for help. You don't really believe anything will help because you're constantly in this mode of feeling fear, and then on top of that, it's just. Yeah. So anyways, I try to help people. And I also tell people like, you know, the first thing you got to do when you're stuck is just start walking in one direction and just educating yourself on whatever it is you're challenged with. So for me, like another really, really good author is Peter Levine. I don't know if you've read any of his books. No. He wrote a book called Waking the Tiger. And then this is like a much bigger book called In an Unspoken Voice that he wrote. He actually partnered with Bessel, and they teach a workshop to therapists that treat trauma. And so Peter's approach is called somatic experiencing. You may have heard of somatic experiencing, but it's this idea that you open up to the physical sensation of trauma. So if you're running from a hyena, or you're running from an animal, your body's like, you know, fight or flight, and you're activating that, and that energy can get trapped in the human mind and in the consciousness and the psyche, and people can carry that traumatic energy. And if they don't have a way to experience that energy, because they're not able to, say you have a horrible board meeting and you're losing all your money in your company, and you're sitting here in your room, I don't get to go run off and run away from the tiger of the financial destruction that's happening in my business. I'm stuck. I have to just absorb that. And so he talks about the nature of trauma and how when we talk about the brains and the triune brains and the different the human brain, the mammalian brain that experiences emotions and the sensations, and the reptilian brain, he really kind of helps people understand how, like if you got hit by a car and the paramedics strapped you into a gurney and you couldn't shake out all that nervous energy, you could potentially walk away from that experience years later and still have that nervous energy trapped in your psyche, and it could cause traumatic damage to you.
It makes so much sense too when you think about it, even like a tiger or a lion or something. We see these videos online of like a gazelle getting chased by a lion that escapes. If you ever see a video like that where the animal gets away, the first thing they do is they stand in place and they shake like crazy. Their entire body shake. They shake it off, and then they just start eating grass like nothing happened.
In his book,
we cling to it.
He references that. He actually shows he shows a link. He's like, if you ever see an animal running in nature, they escape with that adrenaline, and then they have to like fire that energy off. Get it out of their nervous system. Otherwise it gets trapped, and they do that. And you see them do it in nature. We don't know how to do that in human nature in modern times. No, so the other thing too, I think, like why I love that hunting trip and everything, and I've chatted with Paul a little bit, that Kyle and I talked about it quite a bit too, is just if we think about that shaking off thing as other things, right? There's also this issue that we have, why it was so cool to be like on a men's retreat. Really, I've done a lot of men's group work. I did some men's group work in Thailand. And I have some people that I work with in Norway on this, just some coaches that have been great mentors for me. And then that hunting trip and everything is what we find is the shaking off of energy. If we look at that as a different way, there's a lot of pent up masculine energy that guys don't know what to do with. This is like you see frat boys getting in fights at the bar, right?
they're looking for their rite of passage. Like, what is my rite of passage? I have all this pent up alpha thing that I want to release, which is why I'm such a big fan of, like, myself. I train jujitsu religiously. I've been on hunting trips, things like that. I was a boxer in college, and it's just all of this pent up masculine energy. But in the same sense, the way I like to explain it to people is, like, I have a good friend of mine who was a former Muay Thai kickboxer and is now a plant medicine shaman. So him and I laugh, we get together and we're like, you know, I've trained jujitsu for quite a while and boxing and everything. So we both laugh and we're like, hey, we're two guys that can literally kill a man with our bare hands, but can also hug each other and cry if we're feeling sad. And you're like, whoa, this dichotomy that feels so strange, but it's really what we need. We need to, like, embrace the feminine, embrace the masculine, have releases for this totally natural energy. And that's, I mean, like, you know, like the number one disability in America right now is depression. And anxiety ties in with that, those same root causes, gut health, leaky gut, inflammation, all those things, as I'm sure you well know now from your research in mental health. But man, it's important. So I know we kind of went down a rabbit hole there, but there's so many people that suffer from this, man, you know?
Yeah. One more thing I'll add to the trauma thing, because I think it's really interesting. In what I learned was Peter Levine talks about how there's the fight or flight response that people often refer to when they think about anxiety and nervous energy, but there's also a freeze mechanism in nature. And they think evolutionarily, at least the way Peter Levine kind of hypothesizes in his writing, that some animals, if they couldn't run, and we see this in shell shock veterans, when they get to a point where you cannot actually escape the traumatic experience that puts your perceived danger or threat levels in a point where you just cannot leave. There's another mechanism we have naturally innately built into our nervous system where we actually freeze. And we think that maybe evolutionarily, when we froze, predators would sometimes avoid animals if they were completely lifeless. And if they froze, like literally scared to death almost.
Yeah.
Because if a prey was like lifeless, it could be rotting, it could be unnutritious.
Yeah.
And so this happens in the body, in animals. They get trapped traumatic energy where it's not that they fight or flight, it's that they actually freeze. And what they'll do is they'll do experiments with pigeons where they'll come in and they'll scare the pigeon like head on, and the pigeon will see the threat, and the pigeon can kind of like fly away or run away. But then if they sneak up behind the pigeon and they tip it upside down, it'll freeze, and it'll just like stay upside down and it'll freeze for like 30 seconds. And don't quote me on this, because there's a little bit of nuance here that I'm butchering, but the main premise is the animal will literally freeze for like a minute, versus when it's like jolted and it can see and it has also kind of an escape path. The nervous energy is like 10 seconds. It's like a minute where it just completely freezes to death. And it's interesting to see how that mechanism manifests in people, because I'm sure there's a lot of people in society today who are just, they get this traumatic energy. And like you said, there's probably something with epigenetics where we see it in diet all the time. People grow up and they have a certain diet in their family. And I mean, we get imprinted whatever our family brings into us. It's like, that's what we absorb as in our childhood. So I thought that was really fascinating. And
it is, man.
And they see it with what happens is they see it. And, you know, I'm kind of going on a rabbit hole here, but, you know, stop me if you want to get redirected here. But I have noticed personally, like I had insomnia really bad when I was dealing with my anxiety and trauma at its worst. And what would happen is I would fall asleep. And as I was falling asleep, I would have anxious energy about how well I was going to sleep. And my heart would start to race. I'd feel my chest pounding. I would have terrible sleep. I would just like, I would have horrible sleep. I'd have nightmares. I'd go in and out of sleep the whole night. I'd wake up feeling like crap. You know, it was just, and they see this in shell shock victims as well. In war, they see that when the veteran doesn't see the impact coming and they get shocked and they get knocked out, they have horrible trauma like PTSD that cannot be reversed. When they can see the threat coming, they can actually respond. And they call it, there's a term in war veterans that they refer to it as, it's not shell shock, but it's like, they say, as they go in, they come out. So the medics would go in and they would treat the victims. And if the victims were like flailing and kicking and freaking out and totally disillusioned when they went under and lost consciousness, they would come out and be just wrecked. But if they were like aware and present when they lost consciousness, they could come back and they weren't imprinted in a traumatic way the same way. So it's really fascinating.
Yeah, I'm gonna dig into these books, man. That's awesome. But
it's wild.
Yeah, kind of a funny story too, because I want to dig into your carnivore stuff. But that's actually for the vegans out there. That's how your big harvesting machines murder countless doe. So that's what'll happen is like little baby deer fauna, like baby deer fawn or whatever you call them. They have freeze. So when they get scared, they see the big machine coming. They curl up in a ball, lay on the ground, and they freeze, and the machines kill them. And it just happens millions of times in these all sorts of crops that are being harvested for those pesky vegans. But anyway, man. Yeah, dude.